Good morning, Facebook, YouTube, Daily Motion, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your first video blog of the day for Wednesday, January 28, 2015, around 8:44 in the morning in Billerica, Massachusetts, cleaning up after 3 feet of snow, and there's not too much sports news or any news to report, so I'm not going to report it right now, but 29 years ago today was a very sad day in America. That day was when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded seconds after taking off from Cape Canaveral in Florida. It was a very tragic situation and a catastrophe, and 7 lives were lost in the Space Shuttle Challenger tragedy. One of them was a 37-year-old teacher by the name of Krista McAuliffe from New Hampshire, who grew up in Framingham, Massachusetts. Very sad to see that on television 29 years ago today, one of the most tragic moments in American history. And that's about it on that. My next subject is the top 10 everything and anything. I reached the top 10 greatest professional mass wrestlers of all time. Usually mass wrestlers are popular in Japan and in Mexico and sometimes in the United States, but usually mass wrestlers are known to put on a mat as usually an established superstar in professional wrestling putting on the mask for a gimmick, or if they leave town, usually the faces, they will come back under a mask and everybody knows it's the face wrestler, but the gimmick says they never even met the person before, but that's just wrestling. And here are the top 10 greatest professional mass wrestlers of all time. Number 10 on the all-time list of the greatest professional mass wrestlers of all time, the Blue Blazer, also known as Owen Hart. The Blue Blazer had 2 runs in the WWE, one in 1988 and one in 1998 through 1999, which the Blue Blazer was a great wrestler, awesome moves and stuff like that. Owen Hart played it pretty good, especially in the latter run, because he wanted to be a hero and stuff. He says, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, and drink your milk. And the Blue Blazer was slated to win the Intercontinental title at Over the Edge 1999, but a tragedy happened when the Blue Blazer fell off the rafters of the Kemper Arena, and tragically for Owen Hart passed away tragically on that day in May 23rd, 1999. That's another subject for another day, but the Blue Blazer comes in at number 10. Number 9 on the all-time list of greatest professional mass wrestlers of all time, the mass superstar Bill Eddie. This was one of his best gimmicks. He played the mass superstar for over 10 years in many regional territories, including Mid-Atlantic, Georgia, and the WWE. He had a famous feud with Eddie Gilbert in the WWE, breaking his neck and challenging Bob Backlund for the WWE Championship in the fall of 1983. Legend had it that the mass superstar was going to beat Bob Backlund for the WWE title, and drop it to Hulk Hogan, but heard Bob Backlund was against it because he just wanted amateur wrestler with an amateur background to drop the title to. And the mass superstar was the last wrestler the late great Grand Wizard of Wrestling Ernie Roth managed before he passed away in October 1983. Number 8 on the all-time list of greatest mass professional wrestlers of all time, La Parka, he was a mass wrestler which had a kind of a skeleton mask, and he was popular in Mexico, and he wrestled in WCW as well, but he didn't get too much of a push. But he was famous for every time he lost a match, he would grab a chair and knock his opponent down and did a little dance, and the announcer called La Parka the chairman of WCW. He could have gotten a real big push in the WWE if he went there smacking chairs around and stuff like that. He comes in at number 8. Number 7 on the all-time list of greatest professional mass wrestlers of all time, Jushin Thunder Liger. real popular Japanese masked wrestler, one of the most famous Japanese masked wrestlers of all time. His success in the United States is having a famous feud over the WCW light heavyweight champions with Flying Brian Pillman in 1991 and 1992. They had the very first match on Monday Night for WCW in September 1995. Jushin Liger comes in at number 7. Number 6 on the all-time list of greatest professional masked wrestlers of all time, Ultimo Dragon. Ultimo Dragon was one of the most successful Japanese masked wrestlers of all time, winning many titles. Also, he was successful in Mexico. In WCW, he won the Cruiserweight title and even the TV title. And he wrestled in the WWE, but he didn't have too much success there. But he's a very great masked wrestler, and he comes in at number 6. Number 5 on the all-time list of greatest professional masked wrestlers of all time, the Destroyer, Dick Beyer. The Destroyer wrestled from the 1950s through the 1980s in several regional wrestling territories. He was very successful in Japan, so successful that he had his own top TV show in Japan. Amazing. And he still wears the mask to this day in wrestling conventions and stuff, and he comes in at number 5. Number 4 on the all-time list of greatest professional masked wrestlers of all time, the Assassin, Jody Hamilton. The Assassin was one of the most hated heels in Georgia Championship Wrestling history, and in Championship Wrestling from Florida, he was famous for having a feud with the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and stuff like that. He was a very good talker. He also would team with Assassin number 2, and they would like be tag team champions in several regional territories. Eventually, another Assassin number 2 was played by the late great Ray Hernandez, who was Hercules Hernandez. And after the Assassin's career retired, he became a booker and a trainer for the WCW Power Plant and stuff like that. And the Assassin's son is former WCW and WWE referee Nick Patrick. He comes in at number 4. Number 3 on the all-time list of greatest professional masked wrestlers of all time, Mr. Wrestling number 2, Johnny Walker. Johnny Walker was nicknamed the Rubber Man for many years before he donned the mask for Mr. Wrestling number 2, and he usually teamed with Mr. Wrestling number 1, who was Tim Woods, and Mr. Wrestling number 2 was real popular, especially in Championship Wrestling from Florida and Georgia Championship Wrestling. He had feuds, legendary feuds with the Assassin and Rock Hunter and so many others. They had a famous angle in Georgia Championship Wrestling where the Assassins took off the mask of Mr. Wrestling number 2, and they had to put a towel. And then later on in that show, Wrestling number 2 with the towel on, with Mr. Wrestling number 1, attacked the Assassin, and he pulled the mask off the Assassin, but Assassin number 2 covered his face. And later on in the career, Mr. Wrestling number 2 turned heel on his protege Magnum TA, but even Mr. Wrestling number 2 was a good talker, and even though he was a face, he talked like a heel. And he was one of the greatest masked wrestlers of all time. 1980 PWI Most Popular Wrestler of the Year. He briefly had a run in the WWE, but he was a jobber to the stars. And he comes in at number 3. Number 2 on the all-time list of greatest professional masked wrestlers of all time, Rey Mysterio Jr. Rey Mysterio Jr. has been wrestling for over 20 years in Mexico and WCW and the WWE. Won many cruiserweight titles for WCW, and he's won many cruiserweight titles for the WWE. Plus, he was a world champion and the Intercontinental champion. And despite his boyish looks, Rey Mysterio is still going strong. He actually lost a match in WCW in 1999, but when he came to the WWE, he put the mask back on and stuff like that. And stuff. I didn't like that when they took off the mask of him. They did that to many of the Mexican wrestlers who wore masks in WCW. They would have the loser leaves. lose his mask, and that killed many of these luchador wrestlers' credibility when they lost their mask. It's a tragedy when they lose their mask. It's kind of their career's basically over if that happened in Mexico with the mask. And Rey Mysterio comes in at number 2. The number 1, the best masked wrestler in professional wrestling history, is the man of the 1,000 male mask bearers. Mil has been wrestling for over 50 years in Mexico and several regional territories across the United States and stuff. And Mil holds a title called the IWWA World Titles. He's held it since 1975. He's never lost it. And Mil Mascaras is a legend. He does movies in Mexico and stuff like that. He has some good success in the United States. He had a series of matches at Madison Square Garden against superstar Billy Graham in 1977-78, and also wrestled in WCW for a time and in WWE a couple of times. He eliminated himself in the 1997 Royal Rumble, and there's rumors that he doesn't want to put people over, but I don't know if that's true or not. But he's the best masked wrestler of all time. In 2012, Mil Mascaras joined the WWE Hall of Fame. And that's about it on that. Be back later. Facebook friends, YouTube followers, Twitter followers, and Daily Motion followers. 2 more video blogs. One will be about the classic TV series sitcom Different Strokes. And then the third and final video blog of the night will be about personality profile, Baseball Hall of Fame pitcher, knuckleball pitcher Phil Niekro. See you later.